Hello, everybody who has joined our mindfulness webinar. This webinar is all about election anxiety. And we have a great group today, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm Liz Lewinson. I'm Chief Executive Officer of the Frederick P. Lenz Foundation for American Buddhism. Today, we have our esteemed colleague, Fleet Mall, who will be the facilitator and host. The Lenz Foundation is a group that is a grant-giving organization. We began operations in 2002. And since that time, we've given out $9 million, close to, in grants to about 200 organizations. And not everyone is strictly a Buddhist organization. Many of the grants and the groups we work with are teaching mindfulness and meditation in secular settings, such as prisons, schools, and universities, different hospitals, caregiving, many situations where mindfulness and meditation have proved helpful. And Fleet Mall, who's facilitating this session, is one of our long-term grantees with the Prison Mindfulness Institute. So I am going to shortly turn this over to him. We are recording this session. Any questions you have, please enter in the Q&A button that's down below on your screen. These questions will be visible to the panelists, and there will be a separate Q&A part of this session in the second part. So with this, I am going to turn this over to Fleet, and I am simply going to
Well, thank you very much, Liz. And welcome, everyone. And welcome. Thank you so much for showing up for this um, election anxiety webinar. And we're going to be talking about mostly mindfulness-based strategies and tools for helping us all better manage our election anxiety so it's not to our own detriment. And thank you so much to the Lenz Foundation for hosting this. And thank you in advance to our brilliant panelists who are going to have so much to offer today. So I'm going to just say a little bit about each of our panelists, and then I'm going to share a little bit of my own experience with um, election anxiety and how I work with it. So we have today with us two federal employees who are both involved in bringing mindfulness into our federal government and for the benefit of federal employees. So we have Katrina Combs, who's with Mindful Noah, and we have Garth Smeltzer, who's with Mindful Fed. And Garth actually was one of the co-founders of Mindful Noah and has now gone on to Mindful Fed. So it's really an effort to bring mindfulness into the entire federal government, which is a wonderful initiative. And I'm also very happy to say that both Katrina and Garth received at least some of their mindfulness training through the Engaged Mindfulness Institute, which is one of the divisions of Prison Mindfulness and funded by the Lenz Foundation. So kind of all part of a big family here. And then we also have Michael Brady, who's with Generosity Wealth Management and is a social activist who's involved in supporting orphans in Ukraine, been involved very much in restorative justice work, in microfinance and business training for folks in Uganda. Just amazing work all around the world and a longtime mindfulness practitioner. So we have a great group here today. So I'm going to start off just talking a little bit about my own experience. I have to admit that over the last couple of weeks, I found myself thinking from time to time, I just wish this was over. You know, I do have my preferences around who I would like to see elected. I've already voted. I'm going to be in Europe on November 5th on vacation with my wife. So I actually did a mail-in vote just a few days ago. And so I do have my preferences, but in some ways, just because of being inundated with all of this in the incredibly polarized environment we're in, it's kind of exhausting. And I really titrate my exposure to it. I really try to, I have a predilection. I could be a news junkie. I could be a political news junkie. But I really resist that. I check in on my phone maybe once a day. Sometimes, in the evening with my wife, Sophie, we like to watch something on Netflix or something like that. And so as we're turning it on, I sneak in a little of the news there. But I really, other than that, I try to avoid it because, as we all know, there's so much kind of noise in the environment and it's become so polarized. And, we all have our preferred news sources, and we've all heard about these information bubbles that we find ourselves in. And I think it's helpful to realize that there are for-profit media companies that are profiting greatly by creating these bubbles and inviting us into those bubbles and reinforcing that continually. And so I think it is helpful to realize that even though we may tend to agree with one bubble or the other, it's not that the people really creating these bubbles have our best interest in mind. And it's not really that there's a dedication to objective fact finding and truth telling. There are better unbiased sources out there that we can find to get our information, but it takes work. It really takes a lot of embracing a lot of agency and work today. So I think for me, one of the well, a number of strategies I'll just point to that I help me deal with this election anxiety and kind of the exhaustion that can come along with it. Just really focusing on self-care. So just putting a lot of effort into my own self-care, which is getting enough sleep. I have a whole routine of self-care routine I do every morning. I have the luxury of doing that because I work at home, but I spend a couple hours every morning with various kinds of breath work and mindfulness practice and affirmations and yoga and physical work and exercise and really try to set myself up to have a quality day. So I work hard at that. I also try to eat a really healthy diet and exercise a lot. So, and also it has to do with someone you can see the gray hair up there. I'm 74. And so, every bit of effort I put into self-care really pays off at this point in my life. Not that it doesn't at other points, but it becomes a little more urgent the older you get. And so all of that helps me then enter my day with more mental and emotional balance and more mental focus. And that makes me less prone to being pulled into all the distractions and pulled into these various information bubbles and, getting all worked up about it. But it's very much there. And even though I titrate my exposure to the news, it's just there. And I wake up thinking about it. That's why I've had the thought over the last couple of weeks. I just wish this was over because I find myself waking up thinking about it. And that's not the thing I want to be thinking about when I first wake up. I want to wake up with a sense of awe and joy and wow, another day and grateful to have another day. I don't want to wake up and go, okay, what are the polls saying, but I do find myself doing that. So I do a lot of self-care. Throughout the day, I'm always coming back to the breath, coming back to the body, coming back to basic mindfulness of body, mindfulness of breathing. I think in most simple terms, the breath is really our best friend. Each of our presenters today is going to offer a little brief mindfulness exercise that we can all take with us. And then towards the end, I'm going to offer another mindfulness exercise that we can do very quickly, anytime, anywhere throughout our day to come back to a place of balance and well-being. So I think that's primarily what I wanted to share. And I think the point I was also making there was that the need to embrace agency. We've all been enculturated and trained in our consumer-based culture, and I'm not trying to demonize that, but it's just the fact that we've all been sort of enculturated and trained to be passive consumers, right? And and if we want to really have more agency in the quality of our life, we actually need to embrace that agency. So embracing agency in how we take care of ourselves, embracing agency and using tools to keep ourselves in a balanced, mindful state throughout the day, and embracing agency in terms of how we access our information and trying to, make an objective assessment and not just get pulled into these media-driven camps and bubbles, often to our own detriment. It's fine to support, our candidates and our side and our preferences and our politics, whatever that is, but also getting to the area where we think our people are good and the other people are bad, I don't think is so helpful. At least personally, I don't feel that's so helpful. And so, at any rate, I'd like to turn it over now. So, I'm going to invite Katrina Combs, who again is with Mindful Noah. And so, we'll spotlight Katrina and look forward to hearing from you.
Excellent. Hello. Thank you so much for having me today, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Yes, my name is Katrina Combs, she, her. Thank you so much for the opportunity for me to join and speak with you a little bit today about mindfulness during the election season. And what I would like to say, just going along with Fleet, is have a sense of just openness and curiosity about whatever you're experiencing. Of course, the ebb and flows and how much we consume as far as political media, it can be daunting. It can be overwhelming. It can be just downright frustrating sometimes. So, with that, definitely monitor your intake and take care of your heart. Depending on whatever state you're in, it may have different beliefs and biases to your personal beliefs, and your community, your neighborhood may not see the same values that you do, or you may not just align with your local community values as far as the election. And so, with that, I say definitely take care of your heart and what speaks to you, what is your truth, and not to waver and sway in any political way. If you're feeling the pressure or feeling just ostracized or frowned upon in your neighborhood, your community, stand in your truth, stand in for what you believe in the most, and just do what's best for you and your family during this situation. If you need to turn off that TV or not open that news article that pops through in your email, don't do that. Don't you know feel that you need to consume everything. Of course, be informed. You want to be informed what's going on, especially locally in your area, not just the national as far as what's going on, but locally. There's lots of things happening on regarding schools. There's lots of things happening regarding mayors, things like that as well. So be informed, be what's going on in your local community, but nationally, just really listen to your heart and just touching on exactly what Fleet was saying as far as being swayed either way, just stand in your truth. Don't feel that you need to consume everything at once. And I feel like this is just such an appropriate day to have this conversation as well, with it being World Mental Health Day as well. And just to really recognize that and pour into yourself and take care of your mental well-being, from everything from just who you are as your political stance, and just who you are as a person, integrity over everything. And one thing that I just love being a part of the federal community, especially just an organization like NOAA, and as far as Mindful NOAA that I get to have the honor of facilitating with, is that we can speak about this on a federal level with our colleagues and be able to have that open discussion and be able to share mindfulness in the workplace. We know it's not really something that people would do in a secular, workspace, but be able to come to work and be your full self, be your full person, and be able to have mindfulness with colleagues across the boards. I'm so grateful that Garth was a founding member of Mindful Noah, and just being able to pour into us. When I came into Mindful Noah in 2020, we were in a time of huge political unrest in our nation, and lots of people were going onto sides and just being really torn at that point. And just being able to come into a safe space with federal colleagues and being able to, you know, cry, be mad, be frustrated, come to these mindful sessions as my full self. There's so much value in that, so much value. So very grateful for Garth and the founding members of Mindful Noah. And With that, we'll go ahead and then I'll do a little practice with you all if it's comfortable for you in this moment and then this space, if you're able to, if you're not driving or anything like that. But we're just going to do a little bit of a cyclic breathing, and this is great to do just, maybe when you're in that election poll and you're feeling a little bit of anxiety. This is a really simple practice. You just kind of put your mind at ease. Not thinking about any past meetings that you're on or just being present in the space that you're in right now. So this exercise involves inhaling through your nose and then slowly exhaling through your mouth. So shorter inhale. So short inhale through your nose and then a longer exhale. We'll do that one more time. Just a nice short breath through your nose and a longer breath out. So this type of breathing is shown to enhance our mental and physical well-being, and even compared with our typical breathing that we do during meditating. So I leave that with you, and I hope you have a restful election season. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Garth Smelter, my dear friend, and you can take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. I thought we just got going there. I was ready to go for the rest of the time, just focusing on breath. Thank you for that practice. It's so nice to see Katrina again, as she mentioned, partner in Mindful Noah. It's an honor to be here with Fleet Mall, one of my dear teachers who has really set me on this path. And now I have a new friend and colleague, Michael Brady. It's an honor to be chatting with you all about this because as a federal employee, to be completely transparent and honest, these are not the types of conversations that happen readily in federal government. And if anything comes out of this conversation, I hope there's an appreciation in the audience about federal service, our public servants in the federal government, in the uniformed services that are put in these places every election season to somewhat shut down this part of them. We are a reflection of society, right? And we have families, we have communities, we have opinions about the election, and yet we go into the workplace where we have very well-intentioned and appropriate rules around our ability to talk about this reality. It's called the Hatch Act, and as I mentioned, it's very appropriate that we don't express our opinion. We are public servants, and we cannot be commenting about these types of things. And yet, it is real. Election stress is real and it is there. And so to be able to cultivate the conversations that acknowledge and name that that stress is there, that we are a part of society, and to not indulge any type of partisanship conversation, but to acknowledge that indeed we are real American citizens who are struggling with this. And be it Mindful No or Mindful Fed, Katrina and I have been proud to cultivate those spaces that allows us not just the brave space, but sort of the really courageous space around acknowledging that these things are in our life, be it an election season, be it school shootings, be it global conflict, creating space for people to talk about, and more importantly, practice around those emotions. And so, again, it's just I'm expressing my appreciation for all the federal employees who deal with this, and it doesn't matter where you land on the election. It doesn't matter what happens, is that we will face transition regardless. And so policy changes, budgetary changes, climate changes will be a part of our reality no matter what happens. And so that's another layer of stress that we all face in elections. So I'm really grateful for the Lenz Foundation and Fleet to facilitate a conversation around this as a model for other workplaces to tackle it. As I mentioned, Mindful Fed is a bit of a innovative space in allowing mindfulness communities of practice to name these types of stressors and to practice it. And we do it in a very different way where instead of a transactional approach, like I experienced most of my career around well-being, where someone gives me some knowledge and then expects me to go take care of myself. We try to cultivate a space where we show up for one another in a relational space for that transformation to happen. So it's a very much a by employees, for employees, acknowledging that we're all in this human condition together. And being able to enter that space with really respectful and civil conversation around it has been sort of just awe-inspiring that people are able to enter that space and really treat each other civilly, to the point that Fleet was pointing out that we quickly around the practice realize that we're all in this together, and suddenly the vilification of that other side really melts away around the practice. And so I'd like to get us into a secondary practice that I call rest. I stole this from some teacher that I don't remember, but it's the rest practice. It's a little bit heavily guided, but Katrina set the stage for us about paying attention to the body. And so recalling her invitation to be aware of your breath. And if it's helpful to close your eyes to minimize that distraction, the invitation is just to notice your seat in the chair, notice your feet on the ground, and notice your body in space. It's that simple to pay attention to what is there. And with this gentle acronym of rest, R-E-S-T, just that word falling on our awareness, what does that feel like? Maybe a deeper breath is invited. As we move towards the R of relaxing our attention, can you let the edges of your focus just blend into awareness? Releasing that need to be hyper-focused on anything. When you notice a distracting thought, you just come back to that foundation, that anchor of the breath. And we move to the E of exhaling, all doing. As you breathe out, just that release, that emptying of all striving or trying to do anything in this moment. So we've relaxed our attention into awareness. We've exhaled any striving. And now we just settle into that silence and stillness that is available. Of course, there's sounds, there's movement outside of us, inside of us, and we're just inviting ourselves to notice the stillness, notice the silence that is available. And finally, to the T, we tune into all of it. And we trust the process that's unfolding, even if we notice resistance, even if it doesn't feel good. We just fine-tune that relaxation, that exhalation, and that settling. And so as we close this formal practice, letting your eyes open if they were closed to let back in that light and colors, and just the encouragement that quite often rest can feel so self-indulgent, and yet we wouldn't ask ourselves to lift weights for 10 hours, right? We give ourselves rest. We wouldn't run all day, every day. We give ourselves rest. The same is true of mental fitness. And as we are faced with election anxiety and all the other anxieties that we are confronted in this modern age, that rest is truly, I think, a very active service to yourself and to those that you come into contact with throughout the day. Thanks for letting me be a part of it, Fleet.
Well, thank you. Can I go ahead, Fleet?
Please go ahead, Michael. Yeah, thank you, Garth, and Michael, you're on.
All right, so I'm not sure if any of the people attending this webinar have ever been on a panel where you're the last panelist and you have this nightmare that everyone's going to say what you wanted to say and you're just going to say ditto. Well, fortunately, there's so many different ways to address election anxiety that I don't have to do that. But what's great is that's the very first thing that I do for myself is I try to find the humor, and it's usually self-deprecating. Oh, I can't believe this, that, and the other, but finding humor, because for me, I want to live what I preach, which is hope and optimism. And that's easy when everything's going your way, when things are unfolding the way you want. But where I learn the most is when it's not. Okay. I mean, friction is where I learn. And so I always want to remember that. And so I kind of go from the hope and optimism that I want to live my life by and who I am to awareness of anxiety. Why am I anxious? I mean, and that might be very obvious potentially, like, oh yeah, it's obvious. Well, sometimes the normative culture that you're in, you might not know that you're anxious because everybody else is anxious as well. And so I don't know if you ever heard about fish who, what do you think about the water? Well, the fish doesn't know the water. Like what water? Okay. And so I try to surround myself with people who don't re-encourage in a feedback loop, um, my own anxieties. I get you going and then you get me going. And then pretty soon we ramp each other up from a 2 to a 10. It's just not very helpful. Someone's got to interrupt that pattern. And I always try to remember that. I'm in the finance world, and there's a lot of fear around money at times. And there's a tendency to catastrophize. That's what I call it in my business, which is to imagine the future, which is inherently unknown, and imagine the absolute worst. And Mark Twain was the one who said, I've had lots of worries in my life, most of which never happened. Is something possible? Yes, but worrying about something that might not happen just brings me down and doesn't once again feed into that hope and optimism that I want. When you have a diet, there's one thing that they say that's like, oh, don't eat X, Y, and Z. And then there's another theory of dieting where it's like, you don't say no, you say yes to ABC. So I think to myself, what can I replace the anxiety or these negative something that might be. So I like to focus a lot on relationship building, okay, so that I can understand. If I don't understand my fellow community, if I don't understand maybe the other side, then it's easy for me to use they and them and the other language in my own mind, which I just is not helpful to me staying calm and relaxed. And that allows me to acknowledge that maybe I'm anxious because I'm attached to an outcome that I believe that I want, that I think is the better one. And if it doesn't happen, I'm still attached to that outcome. So if I can try to not be attached to the outcome, I notice that in some of my business meetings. If I sit down and I realized, wow, I'm trying to control everything. I've got everything down to the minute. Okay, great. We're going to go from 10:02 to 10:04, and this person's going to say that, and this person's going to go over here. And then I'm probably anxious or insecure. But I also notice when I sit down in a meeting, I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen here. We're going to figure this all out. The wisdom of the group will, when we're done, have a great positive outcome. I'm really looking forward to finding out what happens. I know that I'm probably feeling good and secure in who I am, and it reduces my anxiety as well. what I and this is really everything that I'm about. This is like my hobbies is taking global issues and making them local to things that I know that I can participate in. Um, I work with orphans in Ukraine, so I could spend a lot of time talking about what's the issue, what's the global political the solution to it? Well, I don't know, and no one's asking Mike Brady my opinion. So no matter what I come up with, it's probably not going to change anything. But what I can do is work with those orphans in Ukraine to make their life better. It's something very tangible. I try to do the same thing here in my local community. I can't decide something big, but I can make an impact on this person who has some trauma. It's very identifiable that they might have some trauma. Perhaps I can help them work so that if they're happy, then they're probably going to make the next person next to them happy. And then pretty soon we have a happy community. That's how I deal with anxiety. And as we bring it into election, I mean, I really want to acknowledge that this is taking kind of a life lessons of anxiety into election anxiety because it's very pinpointy, right? It's happening right now. It's in the present. Is um, how can we remain humble about it, not be attached to the outcome? I think it was, I don't remember which, I think it was Garth or maybe it was Fleet, the impermanence of things. Yes, it might not go the way we might want right now, or I might not want, but things are always changing. And I guess maybe it's getting back to that hope and optimism in the world, living, that loving action, not knowing, bearing witness to what's happening so that I can then, of course, make that loving action. Some of the three tenets of the Zen peacemakers, which I incorporate into my life. So that being said, I'd like to share with you a little bit of a practice. It's one that I also stole, Garth, but I complimented them by stealing it. It's the way I look at it and incorporate it. It's called a 5 4 3 2 1, and it's what I do in a meeting where I can keep my eyes open. It's identifying my mind. So we'll do this together. It's really 5 things that I can see, 4 things that I can touch and feel, 3 things that I can hear, 2 things that I can hear, and 1 thing that I can taste because it gets easy to hard. And I just put it in my mind, and it allows me to be very grounded. Katrina, I loved what you started us off with the breath work. I think that that's a good, absolutely. I mean, it's me doing that at the same time that I'm now looking around while someone is maybe causing me some anxiety, whether they're on TV or sitting next to me, and I can see my camera, my iPad, my vitamins, my microphone, and my notepad. I can hear, which is touch and feel. I could touch my coffee mug, my pen, my exercise ball, and a check. I hear, which is the hardest for me because I can hear a fly buzzing in the other room. I can hear myself talk. I can hear some traffic outside. I can smell. I can smell some air freshener. And it might be the same thing, but I could also smell cleaner from my screen. So I smell ammonia. And I taste my coffee because I just got done with some coffee. And it causes me to really slow down and be aware of my surroundings and be very grounded. With that being said, I'd like to hand it back over to you, Fleet.
Thank you very much, Michael. And that was a great exercise. All the exercises were really wonderful. starting off with the breath and with Katrina and emphasizing the out breath, which brings forward the parasympathetic branch response, which is our relaxation response, and then Garth taking us into the rest exercise, which is wonderful. And that was actually developed by another one of our engaged mindfulness graduates. And then I love that. By the time we go through that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, by the time we go through all of those, we're grounded, we're centered, we're not caught up in whatever might be getting us ramped up. It's all incredibly effective. And I also liked what you said, Michael, about catastrophizing. That's kind of what the information bubbles are trying to encourage us to think. And unfortunately, it's kind of the way the campaigns play the game as well. I guess they think that's what's work, is to convince us that if the other side wins, it's going to be a catastrophe, the world's going to end, the sky's going to fall. And, we've all been through enough of these. And it's not to say that there aren't serious issues and there aren't serious consequences of things, but most of us been around a while and we've been through enough of these that we realize life will go on and we'll get through it. And, things might not always go according to our preference, depending on whoever is in power and so forth. But I don't know if any of us have noticed this so far, but the world generally doesn't cooperate with our own preferences very much. It certainly doesn't cooperate with mine very consistently. So that's kind of setting ourselves up for disappointment and stress if we really think the world is going to agree with us most of the time or even any of the time. Having that humility to realize, as Mike was saying, we can't really control the big picture, but there are literal things we can do locally on the ground with ourselves, our families, and our communities that do make a difference. So much richness shared by everyone there. So we're going to open it up now, and I will say I'm going to offer an exercise right at the end, so about the last 3 minutes of our time together. So please hang in there for that. That will hopefully set us all off from the webinar in a really good space. It's called Safe, Resource, and Connected. So we'll do that at the end. But right now, I want to open it up to your questions. So I'm going to open up the Q&A here and see what we have. So the first one is kind of long. I'm trying to record it quickly. Yeah, yeah. Size represented poor people's kind of basic, humane. Yeah, well, I think this was more of a comment from Charlotte, in a way that you in Georgia, where we all know there's been a focus of around the election process and everything, and there's some lawsuits and so forth, that you live in Georgia and you're dealing with that, and you're really trying to find a way to engage locally and in the spirit of John Lewis, who's quite an inspiration from Georgia, and to do that. So. I guess what you were asking there is advice for someone needing fearlessness in a vulnerable situation. So you're contemplating kind of putting yourself out there, and that leaves you feeling vulnerable, and especially in this polarized environment we're in. And so you are seeking advice around courage to be fearless and be willing to step out there a little bit and take action. So anyone have any suggestions there, Katrina or Garth or Michael, anybody? Maybe we'll going back to Katrina first, maybe since you started us off, and maybe you'd have some advice for Charlotte there.
Yes, my advice would be plug into actually maybe organizations that's around you. If there's a nonprofit or maybe an organization that is along the same beliefs as you, along the same advocacy for you, maybe pour into that because there is strength in numbers, definitely. So maybe connect with organizations or your community space. See if that's helpful. Hopefully that answered your question, hopefully.
I think that's great advice. Not doing it alone, not being a lone
Yes.
ranger, but finding people
Hmm.
to do this with so we can have that support. Absolutely. And also, I think it helps balance our own ideas because, the more we work with others and get involved, probably even if it's a, kind of advocacy on one side or another, at least we're mixing our mind with others and we'll end up usually with a more balanced view. So I think that's great advice.
Could,
So
could, could, could I add something as well, Fleet?
Please do, Mike.
I just wanted to talk about confidence is different than courage. Confidence sometimes is misplaced. It's how you feel. It's when you feel good. But when you feel bad, that's when courage comes out. And so I like to think of myself as a courageous person. So it's an opportunity for me to practice my courage. And I would say, just like, you do things in baby steps, don't go before a crowd of 1,000 first. I mean, go with like one person and then five and 10, whatever it might be, but build yourself up and how you build those skills and your own uh, confidence in your own courage.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. So, Morelia Aranda was speaking about she's been practicing mindfulness and meditation for a long time and wondering why it's become more difficult with time. Well, I'm not exactly sure what you're referencing, but environmentally, I think it has become more difficult for all of us because there's so much distraction. I mean, the whole world of media, in my lifetime went from black and white radio to black and white TV to what we now know in social media and the World Wide Web. And it's just we're inundated with distraction of people trying to market things to us, some of which are, good for us, some of which are probably not so good for us. And then all the political noise and all the rest of it. So there's huge amounts of distraction. And I think that's one reason for me. It's really important to get clear about who am I, what's important to me, and what do I really want to do with my day and my time. Because if I don't do that and have that clarity, it's like I'm throwing the doors and windows open to all that distraction, all that noise coming in. And it is, in that case, then becomes harder and harder to be mindful or to meditate. Um, Douglas was thanking Garth for what he shared. Thank you. Pamela wanting to know if this will be available to share. Yes, it will. The Lenz Foundation is going to make the recording of this available to everyone, so you'll be able to share that. Um, uh, yeah, so Eileen's saying the lies and hate speech are what make me anxious. And so how do we live with that? So maybe Garth, you could address this one. How do we live with, just the kind of the hate speech, the polarized misinformation, whatever side it's coming from, the anxiety we feel around that.
Yeah, and that's a complex question too. But I do see a connection there with Morella's inquiry about the challenge of mindfulness. To Fleet's point, we're bombarded with this. The algorithms are designed to have the clickbait and to incite that anger, incite that so that we keep coming back. And then we have all these cultural conditions working against us. Never enough, always busy, disconnect from nature, sedentary lifestyles. And so coming back to the practice regularly and specifically for that, it's such a deep requirement for me to cultivate compassion practice. The just like me practices that remind me that these people were children, they have their own pain and suffering. Some of that hate speech is coming from suffering itself. And how can I position myself, to Michael's point, influence around me? I'm not going to correct that behavior, so to speak, but how can I focus on my own reaction to it? So I think the important part for my practice around compassion is just to notice that there's that initial reactivity. There's that initial anger at their anger. There's that initial, oh, I'm going to prove them wrong type of reactivity. And just practicing being present with that. Sometimes that's not satisfying because we're not acculturated, we're not conditioned that we're acculturated to fight and to prove our opinion. And even practicing with who am I ask myself that question a lot lately. Who am I to have an opinion? Who am I to think that they are wrong? Who am I to judge? And that's a very, very powerful, but a very countercultural question that I think that we have to ask ourselves.
Yeah, it's incredibly helpful, Garth. And I love what you referenced, the kind of just like me compassion practices. And I think that's really important. As Holiness the Dalai Lama has said, what unifies us all as human beings, we all want to be happy. We all want to feel safe, secure, and happy. And we're all trying to get our needs met. Sadly, some of us are trying to get our needs met with less than effective strategies or even harmful strategies sometimes. But it comes because of misinformation or lack of knowledge and so forth. But we're all prone to that. I mean, we've all found ourselves behaving in ways that even we don't agree with ourselves, or not doing the things we know are good for us, or doing things we know that are not so good for us. So, it's all a matter of scale. But I think if we can come back to realizing that person, just like me, was once a child who was full of innocence and all, and has had their suffering, and if there is really untoward behaviors manifesting, it's coming out of that suffering. So I think that's incredibly helpful. So, Phoebe had a question. How do any of you feel about whether it's important to listen to and dialogue with all our feelings and on the path of seeking self-regulation? I think I'll touch on that one if anyone would like to then add to it. So I'm glad you brought up self-regulation, because a lot of what we're talking about here is self-regulation, using mindfulness of body, mindfulness of breath, and various mindfulness practices to be better regulated, right? We know, most of us know, we have these two branches of our autonomic nervous system, which operates our whole body. One upregulates, we need that for alertness, but then it goes into stress and can go all the way into panic and so forth. And then we have the other one that's about relaxation and rest and digest. And self-regulating using the breath and mindfulness techniques, we can keep ourselves in a more balanced physiological state for whatever activity we happen to be involved in. And yes, as you pointed out, it's not suppression. So if we leave out, if we're unwilling to feel certain things, then we're kind of setting them aside and trying to give ourselves a window or a limited frame of self-regulation that doesn't include that. Well, it's sitting out there ready to hijack our balance, right? So, we do need, I think, to be able and willing to include all of our feelings now in a titrated way. We don't want to, lean into something that's going to overwhelm us. So maybe we can just lean in a little bit and come back to the breath, lean in a little bit and come back to something. So doing it in a workable way, but the more our window of self-regulation can kind of include everything, the more balanced we're going to be. So I don't, did anyone want to add anything to that, Garth or Mike or Katrina?
At the risk of Michael's ditto to Fleet, I can't say much more than that. But what for me, again, it comes back to provocative questions that sometimes I just let sit, is noticing the anger, noticing the boredom, noticing the resentment or whatever, and then pausing before the reactivity, right? And even if I do have a short fuse with a daughter or a partner, like asking myself in that moment, not beating myself up even further, right? But like, how is this serving me? Coming back to that question, like, okay, dialoguing, listening to the anger, like Phoebe says, but then in the moment, how is this serving me? And that usually is when sort of the light bulb goes on, the spaciousness is created to say, oh, I can move back into a space of love for my anger. I can move back towards a space of love for whomever I'm confronting, right? So there again, it's coming back to sort of that, just like me, that behind these emotions, there's a place that we can find love. It just takes the time, right? And it takes us to resist that reactivity, that short fuse.
Thank you, Garth. So Ben was asking, what is a simple practice or exercise to see others in ourselves and ourselves in each other? So I think that just like me practice that Garth was referencing is certainly for that. Any one of our panelists would like to offer any other practices that could really help us see ourselves and others and see others and ourselves.
Well, I'm happy to share. Genuinely listening, I think, is important. I appreciated what I think it was Garth who said something about humility. Humility is what old Mike would tell young Mike. And I wish I'd had more in my life, but today's day zero and I can work on my humility. And that also means, what can I learn from the other people that I'm talking with? In the example of the last question, whether it's something that's triggering you through a hate speech or whatever, what can I learn from this? There's always something that you can learn, even if it's just about yourself. Wow, that's a word that I don't like, or that's a phrase. Or there's something that can be done to better the situation. That's the way I kind of address it, is always looking for, what can I learn from this and be better. If I try to throw it back, I'm going to mess up the analogy, but I think I heard once something about throwing hot brick or hot stone at somebody burns you first. Okay, you want to harm them, but it burns you first. So me uh, getting up to their hate, or what I believe is triggering me and I don't like and I disagree with, making a stand perhaps of what I believe their truth is different than mine. I don't want them to bring me down. I'm not going to let somebody else control my emotions like that. It's just, I'm not going to give you that power.
Thank you very much, Michael. So, Morella was saying that I think we're all suffering now. How do each of you manage your own suffering? And I'm going to invite our panelists to respond to that. But I first wanted to just say, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of suffering in life. We all know that, and none of us escape suffering of various kinds. We're all going to experience loss and grief and so forth. But I also think, that statement, we're all suffering right now, the degree of that really has to do with how we hold our experience of life and the level of which we tightly hold on to expectations. I have a colleague that says expectations are planned resentments and planned disappointments. And as I mentioned before, life isn't really waking up every day going, I'm going to cooperate with what Fleet wants to happen today, right? And so, the amount we're suffering has a lot to do with the level at which I expect things to be a certain way. And it's completely reasonable that we expect things to be kind, we expect things to be just, we expect things to be this. But reality is what it is in any moment. So I do think the level of our suffering can be titrated by the level at which we're willing to kind of be with things as they are with openness and curiosity and compassion versus they should be this way. Having said that, we all do suffer. So maybe each of our panelists maybe address a little bit how you deal with your own suffering.
I can start us off. Yes, that's such a great question. Very, very appropriate for, of course, today it being World Mental Health Day, and just recognizing that, yes, we are going through suffering, but, as, such as today, we're going through, a catastrophic hurricane right now. I'm part of the National Weather Service, and just thinking about when we mentioned suffering. So there's lots of that. There's not only just emotional suffering, but physically, people's homes, people's spaces, their comforts are being destroyed right now. And so, when I'm in a space of realizing there's a lot of suffering or I'm going through some suffering, my outlet is journaling. Journaling is very, very helpful for me. Just putting things in perspective, black and white, and I'm seeing what I'm writing, I'm seeing what's coming up for me. And then, so sometimes, that saying, the grass isn't always green on the other side, or, walking a mile in someone else's shoes. Sometimes it just puts things into perspective when you actually write something out. So journaling may be a great outlet for you, or maybe sometimes it's coloring, adult coloring books, or just doing something creative to kind of ease that suffering, that whatever it may be that you're feeling. And of course, if it's something physical, like, going through a hurricane or losing your home or something a little bit more serious, definitely reaching out to resources in the community, whether it's government resources or just friends, neighbors, to help ease that suffering that you may be going through. Um, there's always a willing hand. And then definitely reaching out to, of course, organizations like National Suicide Hotline, things like that, that you can definitely do if you need additional resources, additional help with that. So I'll turn it over to Garth. Maybe do you want to take on that as well?
Yeah, what a powerful question. What a foundational um, question about all of our practice, right? It is that very question that brought me into this practice. And I think this points a little bit to what Fleet has already covered is it's our clinging to the idea that things should be a certain way, cling to the idea that things should affect us only in positive ways, and cling to the ideas that things should change or not change. And so it's this practice, there's regular practice with um, uh, all is imperfect, all is impermanent, and all is impersonal. Those are easily said. They're not easily sort of believed by the body. And so using those in practice day in and day out and being curious and kind with ourselves about those. But it does take regular practice, and it takes a little bit of levity, as Michael was alluding to be gentle with the self, that in this moment, I feel like this should be about me. But then noticing in practice is like, wait a minute, these thoughts are coming and going, these sensations are coming and going, these emotions are coming and going. So it comes back to the imperfect, impersonal, and impermanent teachings that are just so foundational to my practice.
I
Michael?
think, yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
so glad I'm so glad I get to go last because I've been thinking about the answer. And what I love about the question is that it's reminding me that it's something I used to do, I no longer do. Um, I, I'm not sure that I've suffer very much. I just that's a big word. But I'm also a human being with ups and downs and things like that. And I used to have this folder, right next to my desk. It was like my happy folder. And so when someone says, "You're great, Mike," or "I got a card," so I would pull the thing out, and I had all these really happy things that you're the man, and stuff like that. And I used to save voicemails too, that were really nice and pleasant. And I've gotten out of that. So I probably need to go back to that because that's one way that I get myself and remind myself that this too will pass. Um, I had a business deal a number of years ago that was painful and stressful. I'm not going to lie. Didn't sleep for 2 years. And how did I get through that? Because I got to tell you, that felt like suffering. And I remember joking with myself that I'm going to look back on this time and think and be happy with all the ways what I learned. I'm really going to look back on this and be proud of all the things that I learned. But I sure am looking forward to looking back at this time because living it's not much fun. And so if I'm having some anxiety now, one, all the things that we've talked about, but think about, I sure am looking forward to looking back on this. What am I going to learn from it? But now we can be proactive in learning right now.
That's incredibly helpful, Mike. And just anecdotally, your happy folder, those were all messages from me, right?
That's right. They were.
I thought, yeah. So Susan Suzanne, I'm sorry, has a great question here. Speaking to the issue of suffering, one of my challenges is to stop expecting that there's an end to it. For example, the election outcome will end, and one of the contributors to my angst will end, but it feels relentless, and there's a major source of exhaustion and stress. So yeah, absolutely, and that's why I think a lot of the things our panelists are pointing to have to do with how we work with things and our mindset and our expectations and our ability to hold things more fluidly and openly with curiosity and so forth, because there is always going to be challenge. One of my spiritual teachers used the expression living in the challenge. And he also talked about a sense of sort of spiritual warriorship, not warriorship in the sense of making war, obviously, but in the sense of human bravery and living in the challenge. And the challenge is there every day we wake up. The challenge of life is going to be there. And so, how can we work with it in ways that, uh, with self-compassion and in ways where we feel like we're living a good life and contributing? But yeah, these challenges are always going to be there. Any of our other panelists like to address Suzanne's question? And then just to say, Morella or Mori, I'm not sure the pronunciation, was thanking everyone for powerful answers. But would anyone else like to address uh, Suzanne's question? That it seems like the source of the stress and anxiety is never ending.
I can maybe share a daily stress that I have is my to-do list. And so I have to always remind myself it never goes away. If I think I'm going to get everything on my to-do list done, I've already failed. So as long as I give up that it's going to all happen, it's still going to be there tomorrow. And you know what? 55 years later, I'm still living. I mean, and so that's a daily practice of giving up what you think you're going to do and then what actually happens.
Thank you, Mike. Well, I'd love to keep this going, but we are coming to the end of our time, and I want to offer this practice that I promised. It's called Safe, Resource, and Connected. So I would invite everyone just to come into a kind of an awake posture, whatever works for you. And coming back to what Katrina originally introduced us to, just feeling your breath and feeling your body for a moment, sort of tuning in and being present, and just finding your way into that flow of the breath, like feeling the breath flowing in, flowing out. and letting that gentle focus on the breath and on feeling the body sort of ground us here in the moment. Really feeling the body as deeply as you can, all the way down to the bones from head to toe, and feeling that flow of the breath and just letting that slow us down. And then we're going to intentionally cultivate 3 mind states. And the first one is feeling safe. So I invite us all just to say to ourselves, right here, right now, I'm safe. Right here, right now, I'm safe. And in this moment, I'm relatively safe. Now, even contemplating something like safety could bring up fears of not being safe or memories of having not been safe or worries about not being safe in the future. That's fine. We can let all that come and go and just coming back to the reality that at least for this moment, I'm safe. And really let ourselves all the way down to the bones, let our entire nervous system feel a moment of relative safety, okayness. Right here, right now, I'm safe. Right here, right now, I'm safe. Just repeating that to ourselves and not suppressing anything, but even with everything going on, right here, right now, at least in this moment, even this micro moment, I'm safe. I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm okay. And then the second one is right here, right now, I'm resourced. I'm resourced. I have what I need: food, warmth, shelter, and I can be grateful that I basically my basic needs are met, at least in this moment. Again, we may have memories of them not being met or concerns, but at least in this moment, even this micro moment, I am resourced. My basic needs are met. And then the third is right here, right now, I'm connected. I have people in my life. So bringing into your mind's eye your loved ones, your close friends, your colleagues, and feeling that we're part of an interdependent web of caring human relationships. There are people that have our back. We have people's back. So feeling that, really seeing and feeling these people in your life and feeling that quality of connectedness, safe, resourced, and connected. Safe, resourced, and connected. Just breathing that deep into our nervous system, deep into our bones, that quality of at least for a moment, allowing ourselves to feel safe, to feel resourced, and to feel connected with others. So thank you all very much. Thank you all for being part of this. It's wonderful to have all of you join this webinar. And again, this recording will be made available widely by the Lenz Foundation for American Buddhism, the Frederick Lenz Foundation for American Buddhism. So I really want to thank Liz Lewison and Norman Orbestein and others at the foundation for hosting this. And I want to thank all of our panelists, Katrina Combs and Gar Smeltzer and Michael Brady. And thank all of you for coming today and joining us in this dialogue on how we can use simple mindfulness tools to better deal with election anxiety and other types of anxiety so we can keep showing up in our lives and live in the challenge and actually enjoy our lives and create community and find ways to live, as I think Mike was saying, with hope and courage and optimism. So thank you all so much. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.